I'm Jace Lacob, and you're listening to Masterpiece Studio. There are few places as cozy and welcoming as Grantchester, an idyllic little village tucked away in the English countryside where time moves at a slower pace. Summer is always just around the corner, and the wisteria is never out of bloom. But when Grantchester's new vicar, Alphy Kottaram, first arrives in Cambridgeshire, he's denied this peaceful veneer.
Did you get him? Did you punch his lights out?
Reverend Alphy Kottaram.
Oh, yeah.
When Will Davenport decamped with his family for Newcastle, he left a hole in everyone's hearts, particularly Geordie Keating's. Life in Grantchester just hasn't been the same since Will and Bonnie departed, the vicarage sitting empty, waiting for its new inhabitant to arrive. While Geordie mopes down at the pub, staring drearily into his pint, the arrival of a new vicar brings a hope that his life in Grantchester would pick back up where Will left off. But to Geordie's disappointment, Alfie isn't too keen on solving crimes, particularly after being accused by Geordie of committing one in his new home.
Not sticking around?
Well, not really my remit, is it? Murder?
Life, death, everything in between. Thought you lot covered it all.
Not when there's a pint called in.
Over the course of episode 3, the metaphorical parallels of Geordie's work and Alfie's work get closer and closer until Alfie finds himself absorbed in Geordie's investigation.
I had a visit from Lionel Walker.
Anything interesting to say for himself? I know you vicars don't like to break a confidence.
He said if only I'd done more. Well, I'll break a confidence if the truth is at stake.
By the end of the episode, Geordie and Alfie chat about the latest football scores over a pint of Grantchester's distinctly average. A new bond formed, and the murder and morality balance restored. Today, we're joined first by Grantchester's new vicar, Alphy Kottaram himself, Rishi Nair, and next by Grantchester writer and creator Daisy Coulam to dive into all of the big changes in this new era of Grantchester. This week, we are joined by Grantchester star Rishi Nair. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. You're new to Grantchester, coming into series 9 as the new vicar. Was there any sense of nervousness about stepping into, if not the vicar's shoes, then his dog collar?
Oh, absolutely. I was so nervous. It's such an iconic show, and coming in as the new vicar after both James and Tom, who are both brilliant actors and played the role so well, was nerve-wracking. But everyone on that show was such an absolute dream to work with. I felt so comfortable. I mean, on my screening test, my chemistry test with Robson, which was kind of the final audition process, I remember going in and being quite nervous because this is kind of the stage where it gets to where you think, I might actually get this job. And it's obviously doing a scene with Robson, who I've seen on the TV, never worked with on that. So that's kind of nerve-wracking. But as soon as I walked into the room, Robson looked over to me and he's like, Rishi, came over to me, gave me a big hug. And that just immediately just made me feel so comfortable and allowed me to perform. And that's kind of a good indication of how Grantchester was for the next kind of 6-7 months working there. It was the whole cast, the whole crew who have been working together for so many years just made me feel so welcoming and so part of the family, which really helped ease the nerves. And I felt a real part of it from the off.
So I love Alfie's introduction in this episode. He cruises into the village of Grantchester in a cherry red MG Roadster. He's got sunglasses and a suede jacket on. And he doesn't quite know what he's heading into. I think because Will isn't there to sort of introduce him to the congregants or issue a warning about the oven. Is this a moment of optimism before reality sets in, these first few steps into the vicarage?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair thing to say. I think he is going there very optimistic and kind of full of hope and, thinks things are going to go very smoothly. He's he sees he's a half glass full kind of guy. He sees the best in everything. But I think Alfie's a smart man, and he's also not under any illusions. He knows, working in London in the parish in the 1960s, even though it was diverse, would have been still quite tough for him in that period. But certainly moving to Grantchester in 1961, which we are now, and obviously being of a South Asian descent, into a town which is very white British, even now, and obviously even more so back then, I think he knows that it's going to be tough. I think he knows that it's not going to be smooth sailing. And I think he's anticipating kind of people are going to be staring at him and whatnot, but I'm not sure he realizes how tough it actually will be. And like I said earlier, his character is very kind of half glass full. So he is, I don't know whether he's lying to himself or he's just trying to make himself believe that it's going to be great. But yeah, he certainly enters the village very confident in his suede jacket and his red sports car zooming through, which was a really cool entrance to film.
So over the course of this first episode, we do learn a little bit about Alfie.
My dad's an accountant. Mum's a housewife. I'm pretty good at football, terrible at maths, and that's about it.
You're an Ealing lad rather than an Essex one.
Yes.
But how much overlap is there between you and the character you're playing? Do you relate to him?
I would like to say I'm good at football as well, so that's a good start. But yeah, there are similarities between the two of us. Even though I'm not someone who's massively into faith or religion, I completely relate to Alfie in that his morals that he gets from his faith are very much exactly the same kind of morals that I have, albeit not from a faith, just as from a human perspective, but I can definitely relate to them. I think that he's a very loving character. He's very he's a lone wolf. He plays his cards close to his chest, which is something I definitely also do. He doesn't give too much away. And I think, like most people, he wants people to like him. He wants to help people. That's kind of why he's chosen to be a vicar, is kind of to give back to the community. And I think something that's also quite similar maybe to myself is, people see him and they have this kind of impression of him because of the way he looks. And I think he takes real pride in proving people wrong, and kind of stepping up to that challenge of, not being judged by the way he looks, but more by his actions.
On the note of being judged by the way he looks, it's not an easy beginning for Alfie, as you alluded to earlier. He's assaulted by Geordie. He's nearly arrested for breaking into the vicarage, and it's a tense scene that reveals some uneasy prejudices below the happy facade of the village of Grantchester, but also Alfie's own inherent distrust of authority. What did you make of this scene as a sort of establisher for this dynamic? Yeah,
it was really important to me once I got this role. We're getting to kind of the later stages of the audition, but it was really important that when we started filming this, that, it's 1961, we're in Grantchester, a white British town. We have Alfie coming in, who is of South Asian Indian descent. It was really important to me that we acknowledged that we didn't just kind of pretend that this was all fine then, and he'd come in and everyone was like, "Hey, new vicar." I mean, we had to play it to real life, and unfortunately, in those times, someone that looked like myself coming into a town like that would not have been an easy thing to do. You would have had a lot of people stopping and staring at you, amongst other things. So the fact that we put that into the show at the beginning, we acknowledge it, we see what would have happened in real life, I think is great. But it was also really important to me and to the rest of the team that wasn't the kind of overriding factor of the season, of the show. We acknowledge it. We acknowledge it and we move on and we get on with the kind of show. We don't want that to kind of be a constant thing that's just in the show the whole time. So I was really happy with the way they did that. I thought it was done brilliantly well. How everyone assumes Alfie's kind of robbing the church, and there's a really great scene when Alfie enters the pub and everyone just kind of goes silent and stares at him, and it's like he's this alien that has just walked into this pub, which was a really fun scene to film, actually.
I love the awkwardness of the scene that follows after Alfie and Geordie do not hit it off at all, and yeah. Alfie has to sort of lead Geordie out of the vicarage, and he sees Leonard and Mrs. C sort of hovering on the periphery, and it's so awkward, and not just for Alfie, but for everyone.
For everyone.
And Alfie tries to be really gracious, but the tension is palpable.
Pleasure to meet you, Mrs.
Chapman.
Sylvia. Not me. She's Sylvia. I'm Finch. Leonard. Leonard of the House of Finch.
I would invite you in for a cup of tea, but unfortunately all my cups are broken, so...
Well, if you ever need anything...
Oh, you'll be the first person I call.
Is he thrown by this encounter, or is this something he's struggling with at this point to kind of hold on to his composure?
Yeah, I think that there's a part of him that would love to just... I mean, he's already punched Geordie, so he's got his aggression out already. But I think he's... Like I said, he's kind of expecting all of this. And it's even when they were in the vicarage, just before he comes out, Alfie's kind of figuring it out. He's like, someone reported me, didn't they? And Geordie's like, yeah. And he's like, did they say anything? You know, being like, did someone say because I was a Brown? And I think Mrs. C says, someone's broken into the vicarage, a swarthy gentleman.
Swarthy gentleman.
Swarthy, yeah. Which Geordie doesn't tell Alfie that, but I think Alfie in the back of his mind knows something like that has happened along the lines. And I think when he comes out and he sees Mrs. C and Leonard, and he can tell by their reaction, I think everyone kind of knows what's happening, but no one's saying it out loud. And I think actually in that point of time, Alfie is quite enjoying it. He's kind of has the power in that scene and in that moment. And like I said, it's those kind of proving people wrong, trying to make them change their minds. And this is a first kind of opportunity of like, don't judge me for just who you think I am. Like, get to know me, and then you can make your own decisions. So yeah, I think he's quite enjoying himself and thriving in that particular moment, to be honest.
So Alfie hoped to steer clear of Geordie, but they're thrown together. And this funeral that Alfie's presiding over becomes a murder investigation. Alfie wants nothing to do with Geordie or the police.
I need your help with the case.
Right, you see, that's still not actually a question.
No, Christ on a bike, will you help me or not?
No.
Right. Any particular reason?
I'm not a great believer in the police.
I'm not a great believer in God.
Well then, there we are.
What have you got against us, if you don't mind my asking?
In a nutshell, you're a bunch of morally bankrupt, power-hungry, violent thugs who will their power purely to inflate their own egos and line their own pockets.
And I love this scene between the two of them. You and Robson are both so fantastic here. And Geordie is nursing his hurt over Will's departure, and Alfie inherently distrusts the police and Geordie in particular because of their first encounter. But they do find this common ground in caring. Is that the thing that unites them here? A shared empathy or a belief in a higher justice of a sort?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, in that scene, Geordie comes to Alfie and is kind of asking for help with this crime that's happened, this murder. And I think Alfie's probably the first person in 8 seasons that's kind of gone, no, that's not my job. I'm a vicar. I'm not here to solve crimes, you know? And also he's like, I'm not going to help you because, like you said, he's not a great believer in the police. And I think within that scene, we kind of see the first glimpse of Alfie seeing Geordie for who he actually is. You know, it's funny because Alfie's this person we're talking about that doesn't want to be judged by the way he looks, but he's doing the exact same thing to Geordie. Obviously, Geordie had already thought that Alfie was robbing the vicarage, so Alfie has that in his kind of mind already. But he is judging him purely because he's a police officer and is very much generalizing Geordie. And in this scene, we kind of see the first glimpse of, oh, actually, he's not exactly what I thought he was going to be like. He does seem like he has empathy, and he does seem like he actually cares about people. And I think that is the first kind of thing that opens up Alfie, and is when he kind of says, okay, let me help you. I mean, he's still not 100% convinced, but that is the first moment, I think, where he thinks, okay, maybe this guy is not so bad.
Leonard pops by with apologies for Mrs. C's behavior, a casserole, and a bit of a bombshell for Alfie in the form of Dickens, who comes with the vicarage.
Yeah.
And they do hit it off. There's an immediate ease there between the two of them. They're both outsiders of a sort. Does that make it easier for Alfie to relate to Leonard, that sense of wanting to belong but not perhaps quite fitting in? Or is this a newer sensation for charismatic and charming Alfie?
Yeah, I think there is a part of that. I mean, I think when he first comes into the vicarage and offers the casserole, Alfie's a very forgiving person, and also he wants to know the parish, he wants to know the people there and connect with them, and so he completely accepts this apology, and it's really a lovely moment for Alfie as well because it's the first when Leonard comes over, it's a real offer of friendship, and Alfie finds that really heartwarming and wants to get to know Leonard. And obviously, when they sit and they speak, and he figures out that Leonard is also an outsider, I think that definitely is something that they both relate into because Alfie now has someone he can kind of confide in and ask questions about how to, navigate certain things in that town, being an outsider. So it's definitely a connection there, and in that sense, is probably someone who he can connect with the most in Grantchester because he's probably the only person that can kind of get a glimpse of, in some ways, of how Alfie feels, and the same with Alfie of how Leonard feels.
So Alfie, of course, is drawn into crime solving. He quotes Dickens as to why he became a vicar. No one is useless in this world who lightens the burden of another. But really, I like finding people answers, he says, which is, wait a minute, also what Geordie does. And they do actually work quite well together. They develop a pretty quick rapport, in fact. And in the final scene of episode 3 in the pub, it reveals that this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. What is it like working with Robson Green?
Oh, it is an absolute dream to work with Robson. He is so much fun on set. He has so much energy. And he has the greatest stories, by the way. He's been in the industry for so long. And I just love listening to his stories. And he loves telling them. And it can be quite distracting, to be honest. Sometimes we're about to go in for a scene and we're like halfway through a story. And I'm like, Robson, you need to finish this story, man. I can't go into this scene not knowing what happens. But he's such a dream to work with. And we get on so well. We spend so much time together on this show. And we're also both big football fans or soccer fans, you guys would know. And I was actually only last week with Robson. I went to a Newcastle game with him. He's from Newcastle, so we went to go and watch his local team. So we're real good friends offset as well as on set. And the days working with Robson are my favourite. They're always good fun, and we have such a laugh together. Maybe sometimes too much of a laugh, but it's important. It's important to have fun when you're working.
I mean, both Will and Sydney before him had a darkness within them, a sense that they were running from something. But Alfie does present himself as a glass half full kind of guy, which sort of disappoints Geordie in a way. Mm-hmm. Do you see their rapport as being entirely different than Geordie's with his last 2 vicars?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, when I started this, that was also really important to me, that Alfie was very different to the 2 previous vicars. And of course, in turn, by him being different means the relationship with Geordie being very different. I think Alfie and Geordie are much more kind of seen as equals. They see each other as 2 equals. They're friends. There's not really, maybe like a father-son kind of dynamic there. I think it's much more two men who have a friendship. But yeah, it was important that was different because we wanted, with bringing Alfie in there, to be a kind of fresh energy into the show. And, also the dynamics between all the other characters then also change as well. They're tweaked because Alfie's now there, which just kind of gives it a fresh energy. And it's kind of a catch-22 as well. For me, when I was going through the auditioning process, I wanted to watch a couple of episodes of Grantchester to get a feel for the kind of tone and style of the show. But I quickly realized that I didn't want to watch too much of what Tom or James had done because they were both such brilliant actors and did it so well. And I didn't want to kind of emulate what they did, whether that be consciously or subconsciously. And also on the flip side of that, I didn't want to watch what they did and then purposely try and do something completely different based on that, because that also influences the performance. So I decided after 10 minutes of watching an episode to turn it off. And I thought, let me just trust my instinct, trust my choices. And, if I do steer away from the tone and style of the show, then to have the trust in the directors and producers to steer me in the right direction.
You made the right choice. Rishi Nair, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
We'll take a short break to hear a word from our sponsors, and when we return, we'll hear from Grantchester writer, creator, and executive producer Daisy Coulam on the handover at the vicarage. Ocean voyages, expeditions, river journeys. Viking is dedicated to bringing travelers closer to the destination, offering a small ship experience and a shore excursion in every port. Learn more at Viking.com. And this week we are joined by Grantchester executive producer and head writer Daisy Coulam. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Good to have you back again. This is we're talking series 9.
It's crazy.
It's been almost 10 years, I think, since we first started chatting about Grantchester, which is
That's insane, isn't it?
Mad to me. The most recent handover, I want to start by talking about that. When did Tom approach you about leaving Grantchester? Was it after wrapping on series 8?
Yeah, I think we always knew with Tom. We kind of caught him at an interesting point in his career. Like, he'd just done a film with Tom Hanks before he came to us. So I think we always knew we were slightly on borrowed time with him. And he had, he's got loads of ambitions. He directed for us. He writes, he's making short films, and we sort of always knew it was coming, but he gave us enough time so that we knew at the top of season 9 we'd have him for 2 episodes and then that would be it. So in a way it helped us. It gave us a great shape for the series because we've got one vicar leaving and then we've got 6 episodes to explore a new vicar, which was exactly the perfect amount of time to establish someone and really get to know them. So it worked in our favor, really.
Was it vital for you that viewers get a proper goodbye with Will Davenport and with Tom Brittany rather than sort of off-camera one?
Yeah, definitely. I think we would have fought tooth and nail if he hadn't been able to come back. We'd have been like, please just give us a few scenes, because I think it was weird, like writing that script, writing episode 2 when he leaves was sort of like a little grieving process. It was like saying goodbye to him. And I know it sounds kind of slightly trite, but we do become a family. Every time we meet up, it becomes a family again. And it's like losing your little brother, really. And so it's kind of sad. But, like I got a text from him this morning, we all still stay in touch and it's good. But it was sort of like we needed that moment to say goodbye to him, for our audience to say goodbye to him. So we know he's happy. He's happy off in another land. There's another, an alternate universe going on. But now we're with our new guy, who, yeah, we're very excited about.
So I asked Tom about this, but I would love to get your take as well. Will's journey on Grantchester is bookended by 2 images. One of him in black leather on his motorbike, a solitary man, and the other of him in an estate car with his wife and sons. How do you feel about those bookended images for this character? And does it capture his growth from loner to family man?
Yeah. Do you know, that wasn't conscious, but it totally makes sense, doesn't it? Because he arrives sort of, yes, alone, but also a boy, and he leaves a man, really, and he's grown up and he's found love and he's not being an idiot, frankly. And I think what that says really is that, oh gosh, isn't that lovely? I didn't realise that. At all. And it's funny because then our new vicar arrives in a new sports car and it's like the new life comes in. But yeah, it was always a story about him growing up and Geordie sort of being his father figure.
I love it. I mean, that second image, I think, especially after last season's motorbike tragedy, seems to directly reference 1 Corinthians without naming it. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And we really do get him putting that motorbike away. It's gone. He's got the family car now. He's got a family and he goes off in a new direction.
And he goes off to happiness, I think. He has grown up and become the man he was always destined to be, sort of thing, I think. Yeah, it's true Grantchester, isn't it? That he's sort of been saved by the family of Grantchester, and now we need a new vicar to come in and be saved by his friends.
It's true. He does get that happy ending. He has the wife, the kids. He gets the approval of his father figure, which he's always searched for, and he reaches the light. He's a character who's had so much darkness, and I think that's the perfect Grantchester ending for the character.
Yeah, I was just looking back at, funny enough, at one of the storylines for Series 9, and one of the things we wrote in there was, where there is darkness, light always follows. And I think that's the thing about Grantchester. His journey has been dark, but there light always comes in the end. And it came in the form of Bonnie and a family, really, for him. That's all he ever wanted, was a family. And now he's, oh God, it's really emotional, actually. Didn't realise.
It is. I mean, on the note of emotion, the goodbyes in episode 2 are really gut-wrenching. The scenes between Tom and Al, Tessa, Robson, those are so beautifully emotional and resonant. How challenging was it to write those scenes and to make each of them feel both unique and uniquely earned?
It was a hard thing, but what happened was, like, Al cried in that scene where he says goodbye at the car. That wasn't written in the script. And so we had to, and it was just came from him, and he just kind of went with it. He was, because they're, again, they're really good friends. So we tried to create sort of almost like a little shape within the goodbye. So we always knew it would be Geordie and Will on the meadows at the end, and that it would be about fathers and sons. And I always try and get I love you in there somewhere. So it was about, it was about true. That was love, those two. And then, yeah, each of them brought their A game. It wasn't hard to write, and it clearly wasn't hard for them to act because they all were brilliant.
I mean, on the note of that final scene,
Geordie.
Yes?
I hope I made you proud.
Every day, son. Every day.
And then they go their separate ways in opposite directions. They don't look back. But Will leaves the frame smiling, and Geordie is left alone.
Exactly. And that's what we always wanted, that sort of sense that they don't look back, because in a way that journey is complete now, and they're going their different ways, but they're both where they're meant to be. And you know that Geordie's going to be searching for a new soulmate. Really sets up 3 nicely, you see.
It does indeed. So Tom came back to direct some first and second unit stuff on Grantchester. It wasn't a full goodbye, but what was the atmosphere like on his final day of shooting? How emotional was the set, and how much did Robson cry?
Oh, they both they're big criers, those two. They were in the police station and they were just struggling to get through. And at the end, it was just, again, we had a little party afterwards with them, and they put together a show reel of like all of Will's sort of journey. And it, do you know, when you put it together like that, you go, God, he's come really far. And there's all that, when he arrived, he was already into the boxing gym, and he had all that story, sort of his trust in father figures who let him down, his dad dying, and there's like, oh my God, he's been through so much. And he gave a little speech, and Robson cried, obviously. But yeah, it was weird, because then it was like, oh, he's coming back next week to direct in Grantchester. So he wasn't away long. And he's always popping up here and there. So it felt like the end of an era, really.
So I want to talk about Alphy Kottaram. Where did the idea for Alfie come from? With the departure of Tom and Will, what were you looking specifically to achieve in terms of conception with a new vicar? Where was the starting point?
We always knew we wanted to bring in a diverse character, because we felt like it was time, really. It was time in sort of 1960s time, but also time for our show to sort of look at that in a more serious way. So we always knew that. But aside from that, it took a little while to get there. I did some reading around, there's a woman in England who was one of the first Black bishops, and her story was incredible about just her as a person within this very white institution, and how she approached that, and how she approached a religion that tells her Jesus is white and we are made in God's image, so therefore God is white. And how somebody navigates that system was really interesting to me. and to Emma and to the team. But also, it always in this show comes back to who will find their place next to Geordie and what energy do we want from those two. And we've had Geordie with Sydney, and that was quite a troubled, sort of dark post-war. They'd shared that experience. Then there was Will, and it was father-son. And this is friends. This is like pure friendship, and warm and witty and irreverent, and they're both working class, and they both like football. And it was like, that's what we wanted. We wanted almost like, like 10 minutes of these people aren't going to get on, and then just a lifetime of they're the best mates. Yeah.
And so you mentioned diversity. I typically describe Grantchester as revolving around murder and morality, but it has also always functioned as a condition of England narrative, showing the changing face of Britain as we move forward in time. And the past two vicars, as you say, have been white. Was it then part of the initial conception that Alfie would be South Asian to explore perhaps some of the racial issues that play in 1961 Britain?
Yeah, because I think there's a very interesting connection between Britain and India. There's a sort of sense of colonial thing in which I think Britain still to this day very much sort of romanticizes that time and says, we went to India and, this beautiful sort of everyone's having G&Ts on the lawn kind of vibe about it. But to bring someone back into this Grantchester, this very white, very quintessentially British place and its cream teas, and to bring somebody into that who is Indian, actually born in this country, but Indian, and what that does to the community. It's a hard line because we wanted to explore that, but not for that to dominate his character, really, I suppose, because in a sense, Alfie has dealt with racism his whole life and he has a way of dealing with it. And his way of dealing with it is to be incredibly charming. And we sort of wanted to explore it, and we will explore it in various ways. We want to talk about identity and your identity in terms to your faith and the identity of what people project onto you and what you sort of internalize. He's been brought up in this very white Christian world, and he's sort of navigated it by, in a way, not delving into his own culture. So he's sort of internalized this whiteness, I suppose, is what we will come to explore later in the series and later in, hopefully, series 10.
So here's your chance to sort of tease. Will was posh. He was a public school lad. Alfie comes from a middle class, sort of working class background. He's from Essex. He likes cars and football. He says, my dad's an accountant. My mum's a housewife. I'm pretty good at football, terrible at maths. That's about it. Is there perhaps more to him than meets the eye, or is he the glass half full guy that he appears to be?
I think he is exactly as he appears to be. He is glass half full. He always sees the best in people, in the world. But why is that? I suppose what in his past has led him to that moment, that's his way of seeing the world, and that's what we want to unpick. Is what creates somebody so seemingly at ease with the world that isn't at ease with him, I suppose, is the way to tease it.
The final scene of the episode subverts the opening image of Geordie on his own at the pub. And at the end, Geordie's joined by Alfie, and there's an ease to the two of them. They even share the same thought.
Game on the wireless was good last night.
Oh, Leicester Tottenham. Oh, belter of a game.
Definitely not a penalty.
Is this the hope offered by a new friendship, a sense of finding a kindred spirit?
Yes, absolutely. And do you know what? That was improvised in the audition scene.
Oh, that's amazing.
Definitely not a penalty, though. That was between them, that they'd sort of come up with that. And I was like, and I'm putting that in the script. Because, yeah, and it was just that sort of, they're on the same wavelength. They're on the same, they get each other. They just get each other instinctively. And I love their relationship, actually. I'm really excited about exploring it more. Very lucky.
So Will is gone. Alfie's on the scene. There's an anonymous letter in the post box which portends doom ahead. What can you tease about what's on tap for the rest of Series 9?
Oh, yes. So, we like to do a sort of bigger story that's sort of rumbling underneath the series. We've done, the boxing sort of grooming ring. We've had various, I can't remember any of the others, but we've had some big stories. And in this series, it's sort of an exploration of how to say it without teasing, without sort of spoiling it. But it's sort of about religion and how it can be sort of used for ill, I suppose. So yeah, this first letter he gets through the post seemingly makes no sense and is a passage from the Bible. And then you slowly start to realize it's one of those series that in a way you need to go back to the beginning and watch again and go, oh, that makes sense now. You sort of start to piece it together. It's set up in episode 2 and then carries on through. So yeah, it was quite fun to do that, actually, to dot through some little clues along the way.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what happens. Daisy Coulam, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Next time, we enter the harsh, often hidden worlds the women of Grantchester inhabit.
You're not mad, Kathy Keating. You're a woman. Trying to get by in a world that isn't made for us. That's cold and brutal.
In 2 weeks, we step behind the camera with Leonard Finch himself, Al Weaver, to discuss how he approached directing this tragic yet beautiful episode. Masterpiece Studio is hosted by me, Jay Slay-Cobb, produced by Jack Pombriant, and edited by Robin Bissett. Elishaba Etup is our sound designer. The executive producer for Masterpiece is Suzanne Simpson.